All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Michelle Davis, and in my day job, I'm a solar research analyst at a firm called Green Tech Media. I've been a research analyst in the renewable energy industry for my whole career, which fits my personality pretty well. My classmates and my professors can tell you that I'm a highly quantitative analytical thinker. I like the numbers and the rational, objective justifications for things. But I'm also a sustainability advocate, and I have been ever since I took my first biology classes in high school. So when I decided to attend Antioch's MBA program, one of my goals was to learn the rational, objective justifications for the triple bottom line. This is a foundational concept for businesses that want to be more sustainable. For those of you who might not be as familiar with this concept, it's very straightforward. Most businesses have a very simple directive: make as much money as possible. The triple bottom line dictates that the true purpose of a business is not just to create financial value, but to create social and environmental value as well. So what does that look like? Financial value comes in the form of profits when revenue exceeds expenses, and hopefully by a nice margin. Social value might be something like paying your employees a living wage or covering their healthcare expenses in order to support the health and the vitality of the local community. Environmental value could be something like having your company go zero waste or buying recycled materials throughout your supply chain. Companies that are really serious about fulfilling the triple bottom line typically become certified as B corporations or B Corps. And many of you in the audience are already very familiar with the certification. It's rigorous and it's highly respected. In order to become certified, a company has to fulfill the triple bottom line by creating value across all of these pillars mentioned earlier. Some of the most well-known and well-loved B Corps include these ones on the screen: Patagonia for their outdoor apparel, Ben & Jerry's for their ice cream, Badger Balm for their body care products, etc. So if you're an analytical thinker like me, this is what's going through your head right now. All of these companies are wildly successful. They create premium, high-priced products within their respective markets. Of course, they can afford to pay their employees a living wage, or buy recycled materials, or install solar panels. They just have to take a small slice of their healthy profit margin to support these initiatives, without really cutting into the financial bottom line. Maybe this whole B Corp thing is limited to only the most successful companies that make premium products and services. So for my Practicum project, I wanted to deeply explore this issue. I wanted to know how financial value dictates whether or not a company can truly fulfill the triple bottom line. I was especially interested in the scalability of the framework. Could it be applied to multiple different types of companies, whether they make nice fat profit margins or more modest ones? So to explore these questions, I conducted in-depth interviews with 9 B Corp certified solar installers. Last fall, I completed a literature review to help craft these interviews. The solar installation business was a perfect little microcosm for me to explore these questions for several reasons. First, the solar industry is highly competitive. There's hundreds of solar installers in the US, with companies entering and exiting the market every year. So success is by no means guaranteed. Secondly, the solar industry is extremely dynamic. Every state has different rules that govern solar. So policy reform can either create sudden, explosive opportunities for these companies, or can quickly decimate a market. This is quite different from most consumer goods industries, where demand for products is relatively predictable and stable, at least by comparison. Third, the solar installation business is still pretty new and has very little brand recognition. Most customers for retail goods like food and clothing are aware of several different brands, and they have opinions about which ones are better or worse. My classmates can tell you that I love Coca-Cola, and I would never order a Pepsi. The solar industry is not there yet. Most people don't know or even have opinions about which solar installers are active in their area. And then finally, as a little added bonus, I happen to be pretty familiar with this industry, which helped me create more specific, targeted questions about how these companies run their businesses. The most interesting results that I got from these interviews was when these companies would either debunk a myth or a prevailing notion that I had about B Corp certified companies, or when they would reveal a surprising truth. So to share my results with you today, I'm going to debunk 3 myths and reveal 2 truths based on my research. So myth number 1, which we've already touched on. Only profitable companies that can afford sustainable products or initiatives can become B Corp certified. In reality, about half of the companies that I talked to were either not profitable, had had years in the past without profits, or admitted that their profits were relatively modest. So clearly, B Corp certification is not limited to companies that only make large profit margins. These companies had to make trade-offs, just like any other business. If they had a leaner year, they couldn't donate as much to charity, or they couldn't dedicate as much to their employees' 401k match. But these companies also indicated that their ability to employ people or to install solar in low-income neighborhoods was just as important to them as making a profit. Some of them even admitted that they sacrificed profits in certain years in order to install more solar. Which brings me to myth number 2. B Corp certification recognizes businesses that create environmental and social value in addition to financial value. Now, admittedly, this is not a complete myth. It is indeed partially true. But there's an important nuance that this doesn't really quite capture. In reality, B Corp certified companies leverage their financial value in order to create environmental and social value. The companies that I talked to wanted to make a profit, but they didn't want to make a profit for the sake of wealth creation. They viewed their profits as the necessary raw material that they needed in order to support other initiatives like paying a living wage or purchasing supplies from locally owned companies. Creating value in their community or in their environment was not a nice to have, as this myth sort of indicates. It was a need to have for these businesses. It was the entire point of running their businesses profitably. So this all sounds like great news, right? If all companies just became B Corp certified, then all of our sustainability problems would be solved. Well, as things currently stand, the B Corp certification is inherently limited in its applicability and its scalability. It's currently not available for larger publicly traded companies. None of those successful B Corps that I mentioned earlier are publicly traded. Publicly traded companies have struggled to become B Corp certified, mostly because of the legal ramifications. Investors have a really hard time accepting that legally a B Corp has to have both its shareholders and its stakeholders benefit from the company's operations. So, the best example of this struggle is Etsy, who became publicly traded in 2015. After a couple of years of failing to meet investors' expectations, the company announced last fall that they would be foregoing certification altogether. Now, for the solar installers that I talked to, this wasn't really a concern. None of them wanted to one day be publicly traded, and they didn't have any pressure from external investors. But when I asked the companies that I interviewed about this issue, most of them admitted that the legal ramifications of the certification were a major barrier to larger companies becoming B Corp certified. So it's clear that the certification still has some limits in terms of its applicability and its scalability across different company sizes and structures. So now let's reveal some interesting truths. When I first started this research, I expected that some companies would tell me that the B Corp certification had some downsides. I expected them to tell me that it was expensive and time-consuming and generally a pain in the butt, and that therefore it reduced their financial bottom line. But in reality, one of the biggest benefits of the certification was that it gave these companies a valuable benchmarking tool. Yes, the certification required time and money and administration, but these companies were always more than willing to expend those resources in exchange for a rigorous third-party assessment of their performance. The certification wasn't bogging them down. It was helping them improve across all three areas of the triple bottom line. So then finally, and perhaps unsurprisingly, not a single company told me that the certification process was not worthwhile. These companies typically dedicated 1 to 2 full-time staff members to completing the whole process, but the benefits always outweighed the costs. In exchange for completing the certification, these companies got a valuable benchmarking tool, they increased employee retention and engagement, and they increased customer interest in their company, all of which translated directly into financial value. So in closing, I want to share a story with you that I couldn't ignore in putting together the findings of this project. Less than 2 weeks ago, the North American subsidiary of Danone became the largest publicly traded B Corp in history. Some of you might know Danone as the owner of the Dannon and Activia yogurt brands. The North American subsidiary, which is now just called Danone North America, is one of the top 15 food and beverage companies in the US, and they have over 6,000 employees. This is a notable success for the B Corp movement. It was made possible by the fact that Danone North America is a contained subsidiary within the larger Danone conglomerate. While it is the 8th subsidiary of Danone to become certified, the larger multinational company as a whole is not, and the B Corp website makes it very clear that certification is currently not available for companies of Danone's size and complexity. So yes, there are still some limits to the scalability and the applicability of the B Corp framework. But it's clear from both my findings and from this recent news that fulfilling the triple bottom line is not a niche opportunity. Creating value across all three of these pillars is not restricted by the size of a business's profits or the industry that it operates in. Instead, for the companies that I interviewed, fulfilling the triple bottom line was made possible by the fact that they made very intentional decisions about how they allocated their financial resources. And even for a pretty analytical, pragmatic thinker like me, that's reassuring news. Thank you very much.